Welcome to Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. Your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by Hot Springs County Travel and Tourism, reminding you as the cold moves in and the snow, at Thermopolis you can always find yourself in hot water. Lots of winter weather coming. It's going to be very, very busy over the next 7 to 10 days, not only in the West, but over the entire nation. Multiple winter weather events are going to be occurring over the next week and a half or so. We can't just pinpoint and say, oh, it's just one system. It's a lot of different things coming together. Several Pacific frontal systems combining with surges of Arctic air. And then as these systems move across the country, especially as they get east of the Rockies, they're going to expand and turn into major winter storms. And this will impact the entire nation, really coast to coast, Canada as well. So this is going to be very, very impactful. Frequent mountain snow is going to help boost the snowpack. We're really going to see this later today and tonight, then continue with off and on high mountain snow in the west well into early next week. So this will be a really nice big boost to the snowpack. But it will also mean occasional light to moderate snows on the plains and the valleys. Since the snow that will fall is more of an interaction between Pacific air and Arctic air, it's just not one storm system. It's just lots of little systems added up over time. Arctic air is indeed going to be spilling out of Canada. It's going to move south along and near the divide starting Thursday, but it is going to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game, especially as we mentioned yesterday. For areas west of the divide, still question marks on whether or not the Arctic air gets over or not. Right now, I would say it's 50-50. But it's going to be kind of a cat and mouse game because pushing against the Arctic air will be some Pacific jet stream energy and weather coming into the west coast that will cause the Arctic air to kind of wash up against the divide, kind of like waves on a beach. The Arctic air moves in, it retreats, it comes back in again. If it comes back in strong enough, it gets over the divide. This is going to lead to a lot of livestock and travel concerns due to the severe cold that's coming in the winter weather. Also into the mix, possible overrunning snow could develop this weekend. Overrunning is when Arctic air is overrun by moist, warmer air from the Pacific. And this is something we've got to watch. We're not sure of it yet, but it does tend to lead to more of a widespread, possible heavier snow event in the Arctic air east of the divide this weekend. We'll just have to see. The potential is there. So there's a lot happening. Here is the hazards map for the lower 48 states here over the next 24 hours. As we showed you yesterday, strong Midwestern storm moving through right now into the Great Lakes, storm exiting New England. And look at all of the pink and blue from western Wyoming and southwestern Wyoming through almost all of Idaho, Washington, and Oregon into northern California here. Lots of winter weather ahead of this system. The brown from Montana to Wyoming here are advisories for high windy conditions developing out ahead of this front. And this map will continue to be lots of pink, lots of red, and lots of blue and purple here in the coming days as these storm systems come through. Focusing a little bit more, we have winter storm warnings for the far western areas of the state into eastern Idaho and northeastern Utah. Winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings here along Interstate 80. Not a lot of snow, but wind, cold, and snow over the next 48 hours. This gets into the southern mountains of Wyoming. Lots of blowing snow around Arlington and Elk Mountain. High wind warnings in effect for areas east of the divide. So it's starting to get more busy. Two satellite photos to show you different perspectives. Here is the current Midwestern snowstorm and winter weather event that's moving through. Here's the gap in between the systems. So fair weather basically out onto the plains and just along and east of the divide. But you can see this next system encroaching right here. There it is. Coming into southwest British Columbia. This system is going to bring the snow to the mountains and the wind on the plains and another shot of colder weather. Look back across the Pacific. Strong storm here north of Hawaii. Big strong storm here west of the Aleutians. It's a very busy weather pattern. If you look here, there's a lot going on. Just a lot going on, a lot to try to keep track of. And all of these low pressure systems are forming right along the Arctic boundary that's up here, the polar jet stream. This is where we're going to be by noon today. That strong storm heading into the Plain States in the Midwest, heading up into the Great Lakes. This is storm number 1 of 2 big Midwestern storms that will happen between now and the weekend. And then you can see the high pressure beginning to build up and bulge up here, starting to consolidate the Arctic air up into central and western Canada. So this is today. This is by Thursday morning. The high pressure ridge is still here building, allowing that Arctic air to start to move southwestward out of north central Canada, backed up against the Rockies of British Columbia, pushing all the way to the coastal areas right here. We have a wave that'll be coming through on Thursday that'll produce another round of snow in the mountains and a little bit of light snow on the plains. But we start to see the jet stream carving out this large trough. Look at it. It's huge. This large area of very, very cold air over North America, extending all the way from the Arctic Circle into the northern Rockies. And by Thursday, we're going to start to see the Arctic air filter into northern areas of Montana. This is the precipitation forecast through Thursday morning. So you can see the Pacific Northwest and the moisture stretching out into the Rockies here, getting into the mountains. A little bit of snow out here in the northern plains east of the divide, although not a lot, but some. Then you can see all the heavier moisture on the other side of the U.S. So this is what we're likely going to see snowfall-wise between now and Thursday morning. So you can see the high country getting into it. Interstate 80 in south central and southwestern Wyoming, in the northern Utah, Nevada, then into California. You're going to have some travel hazards there. Travel hazards here, airport delays across the Midwest and the Northeast. This is just through Thursday. This is the temperature anomaly by 5 p.m. Thursday. The purple showing where the Arctic air is. So by Thursday afternoon, the Arctic air is now spilling into Montana, but plenty cold elsewhere in the west. Then by Friday morning, that area of Arctic air, let's look at this blue area here. See how it's elongating north-south? This is really causing a lot of chaos in the modeling on exactly what this big blob of Arctic air is going to do, because it does look like a piece of this Arctic air is actually going to detach from this area of Arctic air and head westward into the north slope of Alaska, while this other piece of Arctic air gets pushed this way, spilling along the divide. But you can see, speaking of which, along the divide, by Friday morning, the Arctic air is going to get more of a push south into the northern Rockies and the northern plains. This area of low pressure that's going to move through Thursday, by Friday will be in western Kansas. Then this is going to blow up in the Great Lakes and be a major Great Lakes storm by this weekend as Arctic air spills in on the backside of this. Now, these are the temperatures by Friday morning. These are temperatures in Fahrenheit. And you see correctly, 59 below zero here in western Alberta, 51 below zero here. We're below zero over a large part of Montana into the Dakotas. So the Arctic boundary is basically by Friday morning kind of held up right along the Montana-Wyoming border area. This is Friday morning. By Saturday morning, look at the push of Arctic air coming much further south all the way down into northern Colorado, reaching basically the I-70 corridor area. Now, these are temperatures by Saturday morning. This is not the wind chill. These are just air temperatures. So you can see we've got a lot of minus 30s in Montana, a lot of minus 20s in northern Wyoming, and it's pushing right up against the divide. Some of it getting over the divide. This is the cat and mouse game, especially for you West Slope folks, Utah folks, and the eastern Idaho. It's going to be a cat and mouse game whether or not that Arctic air spills in or not. But you can see the temperatures by Saturday morning. We still got a minus 52. That's air temperature in Alberta and British Columbia there, and very bitter cold going into the northwest areas and the valleys of Montana. Look at the wind chill values by Saturday morning. This is where we're talking about concerns for livestock interests. Pink there in the pink shading means wind chills in excess of 40 below. So 40 below or more wind chills by Saturday morning will be possible across northern and northeastern areas of Wyoming. Some of that Arctic air spilling over the divide. If it gets a bigger push, that Arctic air could be much further west. We're just going to have to watch it and see how it goes. Remember, Arctic air is dense It holds very close to the ground. So the Arctic air has to get deep enough to get over the continental divide. It's got to get pretty deep to do that. That's why it's very tricky to see where that Arctic air will go. Now, by Sunday morning, here's the cat and mouse game. By Sunday morning, the Arctic air backs off a little bit and retreats back to the northeast. But it could very well come right back in again by Sunday night into Monday and Tuesday. Now, the reason the Arctic air is retreating to the northeast a little bit, where the sub-zero temperatures are, is because we've got Pacific energy and moisture pushing up against that Arctic air. And this is where we could end up with that overrunning situation. This is by 5 p.m. Saturday. We have this little low. It doesn't look like much, but this low will spread higher humidity air eastward. That could overrun the Arctic boundary. That green arrow here represents the moisture. The blue area represents the Arctic air, and then you have the Arctic air getting overrun by Pacific moisture. So along the Arctic boundary, you have snowfall along the boundary and east of the boundary. That is something that could come into the equation this weekend, causing travel problems, accumulating snow in some areas, along with those Arctic temperatures. And this is the total precipitation forecast through Monday. This is what we would call is some of that overrunning snow right here, where the snow could be heavier. Again, question mark, not exactly sure if that's going to come together or not, but if it does, you're going to have heavier snow here in eastern areas of Wyoming and western Nebraska if that overrunning takes place. But look at all the red and the orange into the high country. This is why we're going to see a nice boost in the snowpack in the coming days in this pattern. This is the 7-day snowfall forecast. Again, this is for display purposes only. Don't look at these numbers and say that's what's going to be in your backyard. But it does highlight where the snow is likely going to fall in this collision of Arctic and Pacific. This is the 10-day snowfall forecast for the U.S. So you can see very snowy across a lot of the nation, and that snow getting pushed pretty further south. We'll take a look at this tomorrow, but we're going to have an ice boundary here. There's going to be some ice conditions along that Arctic boundary that could cause a widespread icing event, complicating things even more. And we haven't even talked about what's going to happen early next week about this Arctic air maybe getting all the way to the Gulf Coast and possibly into Texas. So a lot going on. Stay tuned. We'll have more for you tomorrow.